And you're watching show number 3, so it's a pleasure to have you back, and thank you if you have been watching the other shows. And I'd like to introduce you to Bo Fall, my colleague over at Perth. How are you, Bo?
Good, Lou. Good. Thanks for that. Good weather over here in Perth, so I can't complain too much. For those that haven't watched the show before, I'm Bo Fall. I'm a technology specialist based out of Perth, WA. I think this is episode 3, so thanks for tuning in. And I've recently started to do some martial arts again. So I've been training about 3 times a week here in Perth for over the last 6 months. And for those that are kind of interested in it and aren't sure if they're going to dive into it or not, I think it's really helped with my energy and my focus. So if you're keen on actually trying it, the hardest part is just getting in there and doing it. So I definitely consider doing that. How about you, Lou? What's up in your world?
Yeah, for me, my focus comes from my music, as you know, so more of the same. In fact, you got a little sample of what I've been doing in that title sequence, so hopefully that's a bit more to your liking, Bo.
I think
musically.
That is probably my favorite one so far, so I can't complain.
Lovely. So what else have we got coming up today?
On this episode of Coast to Coast, I'll be covering some of the topics on things like multi-cloud compliance, while Lou speaks about investigating some of the broader insider risks as they pertain to non-compliance and potential breaches. We also have our first special guest. So we've got Reshmi Hariharan, and she is a technology specialist that works alongside Lou and myself, and she's based out of Canberra. Reshmi, did you want to introduce yourself and see what you're talking about today?
Reshmi. Absolutely. Thanks, Bo. Thanks, Lou. Hey everyone. Excited to be joining Lou and Bo in this session. I am a technology specialist based out of Canberra. Today is looking quite sunny here, and it's good to be sunny, especially Canberra. I'll be talking about e-discovery today.
Awesome. So I guess next we'll just jump straight into our news. So there's a couple of things I wanted to speak about today. So data loss prevention, this has been updated for macOS support and has some advanced classification features. So that's gotten a bit better. So we can start creating DLP policies to audit activity for supported file types. And the other thing I was quite keen to talk about is the retention of records management. I know we haven't spoken much about this previously, and trust me, it is coming because it's a fairly big topic. But there's 2 bits in here that I wanted to speak about. First is adaptive policy scopes have been deployed, and they're out into preview now. And we've covered that in a previous session here and showed off how it works. So that's out in public preview. And secondly, and the thing that I'm most excited about, is now we can apply a retention label based off a sensitivity label. So a sensitivity label in information protection is obviously like a classification of certain data. So highly confidential, private, public, build out of that. What we can do now is when we apply, say, a sensitive label to a document or a file, we can automatically trigger that a retention label gets added to it. So let's say anything that's sensitive can now have 7 years of retention built onto the platform in of itself. And I think that's really powerful. So with that, it's a really good tool. A lot of people have been asking for it. So I'm really happy that we've got it out and it's been released or coming out in the previews. That's really good. With that, I'll hand over to Lou. What's interesting you this week, Lou?
Yeah, we had our Ignite session just recently, and there was a lot to get through. And one of the things that I did actually catch up with, it was a great session on how our insider risk solutions kind of work together and inform each other, and really spoke well to our platform story. So I thought I might actually share my screen, if that's all right with everyone.
Yeah, go ahead.
And give you a bit of a walkthrough of some of the stuff that I think is useful. So plates, you should be seeing my screen now. There you go.
Yep, it's up on there.
And I know I made a joke a little while ago about being a non-PowerPoint zone, but so this is my concession to that. So it's still PowerPoint, but I'm drawing a little bit just to make life a bit easier for myself. Look, when we think about insider risk management and the threats that we're all dealing with. You know, every company has very similar requirements. We need to protect the company data itself, obviously. We need to also protect the customer data we're dealing with because we're custodians of that content, and super important. But then also we now have this, well, not now, but we've always had the balance of all of that with employee privacy and employee rights. And this is even more so in this day and age with people working from home, hybrid, and all this talk about vaccination mandates and proof of vaccines and all those sorts of potentially very touchy privacy areas.
Yeah,
so when it comes to
worse as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit of a wake-up call because I think the balance needs to come back the other way a little bit toward the end user and the employee.
Yeah.
In some organizations. But look, the stuff in red, you know, we do the control really well. When it comes to protecting company and customer data, we've got DLP policy. We've got sensitivity labeling, like you've just talked about, you know, the ability to apply retention labeling, and then of course all the monitoring alerting that goes along with that. And on the privacy side, you know, all of our consoles provide really good role-based access control, or RBAC, you know, so we make sure that only the right people are seeing the information in those consoles, especially when it comes to end users. We anonymize content where it's appropriate. So we do that to sort of remove both positive and negative bias. You know, if I'm in a console and I see an alert and I know it's someone I know and I'm fond of, you know, I might be a little bit more lenient compared to someone I've got a negative bias against. So we remove that bias by anonymizing where possible. And we've got some great privacy management solutions in there, specifically a privacy management solution in the catalog that's worth having a look at. But of course, what happens when we have a breach? And this was going to be an animated slide. My apologies. There was going to be sound effects. There was going to be animation, possibly even dragons, who knows? But it was going to be very impressive. In your head, make all those pictures. But when we do have a breach, we've got to start investigating. And we think about who gets involved at the point of investigation. We've got to pull in HR. We've got to potentially get legal involved. We've got investigators. You may have a dedicated team of investigators in your organization to deal with any breaches of these policies. Law enforcement might be involved, unions, etc. And, you know, typically we may jump straight to something like advanced e-discovery that Reshmi is going to talk about later, but we have so many other opportunities to investigate, to educate, and to realign people, and just make sure that we can actually have a functioning organization before we get to that level of or that extent of investigation. So we come back to these requirements again, right? We've got an obligation to protect all that data, but at the same time, we're going to balance that with that whole concept of respect. As I've already mentioned, advanced e-discovery, fantastic solution. But I want to position it as not the last resort, but something a bit further down the line, because everything you're seeing there in yellow, the ability to audit events, let's have a look at what's going on as we investigate. Content search without having to launch or put custodians into hold to sort of hold and retain data. The ability to build policy in both communications compliance and insider risk management, which may end up with an advanced e-discovery case, but we don't have to start there. And again, all of these solutions work together. This is the compliance console. You'll see that they all inform each other in terms of signals. So there's a lot of good opportunity here to do investigations, but also help our users out. And we'll start with communications compliance. You know, the intention here is that we want to do some detection and remediation of communication risks. This is distinct from DLP policy, where we're more concerned about data exfiltration. This is about what's happening in your organization, between departments, between your employees, especially in this hybrid environment where a lot of us are working from home. We've got to be careful about things like fatigue and things like harassment, profanity, potential breaches in that respect, as well as the traditional things of dealing with sensitive information across parts of the organization. Really importantly, we want a privacy-first approach. It's striking that balance.
Something I'm keen about in that, Lou, as well, is that this is using trainable classifiers, right? So we can kind of build those models out as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so what you're seeing here in communications compliance in the console is some of that insight that we're getting without necessarily have to jump in immediately and sort of ring alarm bells. I've got profanity floating around in my organization in 31 messages. There's some threatening behavior and language in 9 of them. Some of these policies can be built, but a lot of this is 0-day insights. We can get this information directly out of the console based on existing content. As you can see, as we drill in, I've actually built some policies here where I'm looking explicitly for inappropriate or offensive content, both language but also content. I've got a couple of items pending in both of those examples. I've got a specific policy where I'm looking out for COVID-19 related information. And what I'm looking for here is any sentiment within my organization around anti-vax, vaccine mandates, what's the feeling around, well, not so much what the feeling is, that sounds a bit more ominous than it needs to, but I'm looking for breaches. And I know, for example, lots of organizations have a policy where employees should not be asking each other about their vaccination status. Okay, yep. It's not just a personal thing, it's a professional courtesy to each other as well, that we don't cross that privacy line. So I'm potentially finding or looking for that kind of content within Teams messages or emails, so on and so forth. And the regulatory compliance, you know, is there financial data floating around? So we're leveraging things that we're already doing with sensitivity labeling and potentially retention labeling. We're looking for that in a different context. And so here's an example of digging in. I've spared everyone. Okay, this is art. Let's grow up. Come on. But, you know, this is an example of what would happen if people were sort of communicating or sending each other some lewd or inappropriate images. And, you know, making a joke of it, but if we've got an education environment or there's some other content here which is going to be offensive, this is not about stamping it out, it's about surfacing it up. So in this case, it's something quite harmless. It's actually somebody exchanging some photographs from a trip. It's quite informal. I've redacted that myself just for the sake of the presentation. But look, to be clear, you do get the ability to redact images in communications compliance. So, you know, that's part of the tool set here because I may need to bring in some other investigators and I don't need to subject everybody to the same imagery, especially if it is truly something, you know, quite offensive. But in this case,
I think something to say in there as well, Lou, is a lot of the time we'll block that stuff from coming in externally in URLs, things like that, via a firewall rule. Like we'll block pornography or we'll block threatening language or we'll block other things. I think it's important to note that this helps make that solution more holistic. So this is making sure that we're watching everything on internal communications, right?
Absolutely. We want a consistent, if you like, sense of what's acceptable and not. If it's not acceptable externally or internally, it shouldn't be internally as well. You know, here's another example from the COVID-19 policy where I'm picking up some hits on some COVID conversation within a Teams message. Now I've flipped this over to plain text, but you know, you also do get the native Teams chat view. So these conversations can be looked at in the context of each other. This is email. I'm looking here at regulatory compliance and, you know, in this single email entitled check this out, there's 4 attachments. One of those Word documents, you can see this is Contoso Bank, and that's kind of my trigger word for this policy. So at this point, we don't necessarily have any breaches. I've set policy up, and the intention here is give me some, you know, surface anything that warrants some investigation. You'll notice all of these are sitting in the pending queue. So they need to be reviewed by a human to decide whether there's a problem here or not. And in most cases, you know, this is not going to be a problem. We can tune this as we go. Where there is a problem, we can take the next step. As you can see here, Megan Bowen, I've now surfaced her identity. She's got a number of issues against her, but I'm hitting the escalate for investigation option. This will send that information across to advanced e-discovery, and over in advanced e-discovery, as we'll find out with Reshmi, we've got a lot more capability in terms of dealing with not just, in this case, Megan, but collusion. Who else is she working with? Which other custodians do we now need to bring into this investigation? What else is happening? What's the context of this behavior? That's communication compliance. Similar logic here for insider risk management, another solution in our compliance stack. And again, the intention here is let's get some insight as to what's going on internally. Let's investigate in place as much as possible, and where it's warranted, then escalate that to advanced e-discovery because it justifies the work there. So in this case, we're pulling signals from lots of different locations. I've got endpoints enrolled in our compliance solutions. If you're running Defender for Endpoint, they're also enrolled as well. What that gives me out of the box is this level of auditing and visibility. I can see that on my endpoints out there, there are files being copied to personal cloud storage devices. There's files being downloaded from SharePoints. There's files being copied to network shares. This is not necessarily breaches of policy, it's activity, which might warrant further investigation. And I'm going to drop a catchphrase here that might date me because it's one of those things that make you go, You guys have no idea what that means there. It's a classic song. We'll talk about this later. Things that make you go, All right, anyway, so we're digging into inside.
I've only heard that on an ad on TV at some point. I'm not sure what it was from, but I'm pretty sure it's sort of fast food outlet or something.
Stop, you're killing me. You're killing me. Let's move on. So inside of risk management here, as you can see, I've actually created 2 cases to investigate some of this activity. And the first one is COVID-19. And there's also a potential data leak from Contoso Bank. You'll notice in the user column there I've anonymized both names. And the intention again here is, it looks a lot like advanced e-discovery in the sense that the terminology is similar. There's a case that I'm investigating. And then within that case, you can see now that I'm in Content Explorer. And within Content Explorer, I'm doing my investigation. I'm looking at the files that have actually been pulled in. And I'm looking for those matches on what is this content that warrants some review. And eventually, just like communications compliance, there's a little bit more things that make me go, In this case, this is on a single user. These are the signals that we're pulling from multiple locations, including endpoint. But as you can see here on the left-hand side, we've got lots of exfiltration activity happening. I've got sensitive files moving to new locations. I've got unusual volume of sensitive files being read, and almost more alarmingly, there's a lot of files being renamed. Now that in itself could be enough justification to investigate this further. That pattern of behavior looks suspicious. So in this case, I think we've got enough to escalate. So we're going to escalate this for investigation. We've got a nice view here that's both chronological but also highly detailed. And I should point out, every one of these little blue hyperlinks here will take you into a lot of detail. There's a lot of scope for investigation. And similar to Compliance Manager, Compliance Manager? No, Communications Compliance, I'm sorry.
Communications Compliance.
Similar to the previous example, I can escalate from investigation. This will carry over the users. They'll become custodians. The evidence gets carried across, my notes, all that wonderful stuff. And then, of course, we land here in advanced e-discovery. And, whether we're launching and opening a case directly in here or jumping on cases that have arrived from communications compliance or insider risk management, this becomes the one-stop shop for this stuff. And look, really importantly, if nothing else, what this does for us, I'll just come back to the 3 of us, here we go. What that does for us is actually frees up the investigators who are working in advanced e-discovery to really only focus on those cases where their expertise and the expense of their expertise is justified. They're not dealing with the sorts of things we've already seen, people exchanging pictures from holiday snaps from holidays. So that's what I got, mate. And I think,
good.
I think, Reshmi, you've got the lowdown on advanced e-discovery.
Yes.
And I should say, everyone, for those of you watching, Reshmi is part of our team. I'm one of the compliance tech specialists in Melbourne, of course, so is Bo. But Reshmi takes up the post in Canberra, which is significant, because if you're going to talk about compliance and having to be a guru in this space, Canberra is the place you want your gurus, and that's why we've got Reshmi out there.
Oh, that was great, Lou. I don't know about it, but hey, everyone.
I got hired.
So I look after federal government customers, ACT government and NSW government customers, and compliance does everything about compliance does come up quite a bit. And recently, there's a lot of e-discovery interest among our customers. And one thing Lou said, you can look at it from an insider risk perspective. You can land at advanced e-discovery from an insider risk management angle or compliance, communication compliance angle, right? But obviously, especially if you are with the government sector, There could be freedom of information requests and other legal investigations that normally an agency is subject to, and they might have to respond to a lot of requests and then get in a lot of information. And that's when really that advanced e-discovery comes in, and it helps to sort of bring everything together and manage that end-to-end workflow. And especially when advanced e-discovery is concerned, it's not just an IT function. There's legal team, and often they go to IT and then say, hey, these are the keywords. I want to be looking at content that contains something. These are the keywords. Can you surface everything that's related to these search terms? And the IT usually goes and does some search and then give that file, download it, or probably share it to the legal team. They go in and say, hey, this is not exactly what we were looking for. Can you do a search on something else? And this is something that one of the pain point that I've commonly listened to from our customers. There's a bit of circling back and forth. There's lost time, effort, and usually these lawyers are really expensive, so their time is precious. And it just adds to the cost of e-discovery. So what's the best thing with our solution, which I like, obviously, is that everything happens in place within M365, and the lawyers or the investigators themselves can run searches. They don't require a lot of hand holding or IT skills, or not even partial. It's quick, easy, a good UI experience. They can create their own searches, probably a bit of assistance from IT, and they can decide for themselves, what comes up, etc., etc. In terms of case management, obviously, we relate it to the EDRM, electronic discovery reference model. And when we create a case, you have the option to add custodians to the case, like who are the people that you are investigating on. Probably add three or four, or probably all your organization into as custodians. And the best thing with this solution is that it just brings up the exchange mailboxes or OneDrives that they are part of, without people having to worry about which are those locations that are related to these custodians. And it also pops up the team's channel that they're a part of, and you can place those locations under investigation. And you also have the ability to add other databases like SharePoint sites or OneDrive, etc., where you think might be something relevant to the case. And once you add custodians to the case, you can place their content on hold. So what that hold does is, in case if there's a retention setting working in the background, and if that content is subject to a retention policy that deletes it, say, after 10 years, and you have started a case at the end of 9 year, it makes sure that the content is still retained no matter what until the e-discovery case is closed. So it just makes sure that you have the available information for any e-discovery cases that you might end up creating. And the best thing with advanced e-discovery is that it comes at the review stage. So can be given permissions to come in and then look at everything within M365 platform itself and go through review in place. You don't have to export content externally unless you absolutely have to. People can come in, do the review, tag content, annotate. I don't have a comic image like Lou did. But if you had something sensitive in your review, said you could redact content so that it doesn't leave the boundaries of your organization. And obviously, we have some advanced, analytics capabilities, which helps to make the review process a hell lot easier. That's where most of the time gets lost in an e-discovery process, reviewing millions of documents and making sense of what is relevant to a case and what is not relevant to a case. But then I might just quickly share my screen and then show how that review set looks like, and what are some of the cool features or capabilities that I'm absolutely excited about.
Awesome. I think while you're getting that up, well, one of the key things that you've noted, and I think it talks more broadly about the compliance stack as a whole, it's not necessarily just for IT or security or other people to look after. There's going to be HR involved, there's going to be legal involved, there's going to be a whole bunch of different aspects and different teams that need to be involved with some of these cases. So I think it's really good just to note that going forward.
Yeah, absolutely, Bo. And one other point is that, it's just not for M365 ecosystem. we by default, enable SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, Exchange mailboxes, etc. In any discovery search, but you always have the ability to import content which are non-Microsoft 365 into M365, so that that end-to-end workflow for e-discovery can be managed still in place, right? Which is pretty cool. Um, so this is where I have in my demo tenant just created a case where people are investigating credit card leaks within an organization, and I've added some custodians to this case, some data sources to this case, place their content on hold so that nobody can intentionally or unintentionally delete this particular content. And I've added it to a review set, and this is how the review set would look like. And if reviewers or the lawyers have the right permissions, they can come in, and this is how they can, review content in place. And they can probably tag content, and then assign, say if this is relevant to the case or not relevant to the case. Oh, sorry, I might have to sign in again because the session was open for a while. But anyway, it conveys what the solution can do. So people can review and then view everything in place. This keeps popping up. That's annoying. And then people can review content in place and then annotate some content from here, redact some sensitive content from here. And you also have the ability to run analytics on this content. So what it does is, after running the analytics, if you have millions of documents, you have the ability to see duplicates and near duplicates, which saves a lot of time because reviewing documents manually is not feasible, millions of documents. So it gives the ability to group documents together so that the review becomes a bit easier. And the other feature is the predictive coding that's in preview at the moment. So what it does is, I might stop sharing my screen.
Relog in if you want. That's all good.
Yeah.
If anyone doesn't believe that we record this live, this is exactly what happens with demos every time.
All I'm going to say is that I'm glad to see it happening to someone else for a change.
Oh, I had too many demo environments open because I was on a customer call, and then this is open for a while. I guess it might be fixed right now. I hope so.
Let me know when you're ready.
Yep.
Didn't sacrifice to the demo gods first, Reshmi. That's what the problem is.
Yep. All good. I think I'm good now.
Good.
So what running the analytics does is, you get the ability to look at the near duplicates for this particular document and the exact duplicates in the review set, and then people can review, things a bit quicker. That's one cool new feature. The other one, which is pretty new, is the Teams chats, because in traditional e-discovery tools, what happens is each of these individual chats gets exported as a separate HTML file. But with advanced e-discovery, the best thing is we have this chat history, and this can be exported as a single file. So the reviewers would have some context around what's happening, in what context some conversation is going on. And you also have this email threading feature, which is pretty new. So what it does is, if you have an email and a couple of attachments to this email, we'll group we'll show the email and all the attachments under the email itself, so that the review process becomes a bit easier. The other recent feature which is in preview at the moment is the uh, advanced DLP, advanced e-discovery for Teams, and that supports modern attachments. So if somebody is sharing a SharePoint link or OneDrive link in a Teams chat, we would by default go and fetch the attachment from the right location if that's coming under any discovery case. Those are some of the features in here, and the other analytics feature that's in preview at the moment is predictive coding. So what predictive coding does is, if you have millions of documents, right, you can create a training model which is called the predictive coding, and you can feed that training model with 50 documents from the review set, and just say yes and no to those 50 documents, saying that whether those documents are relevant to the case or not relevant to the case. And the end of the day, after running 2 to 3 training rounds, the model learns itself, and then it can automatically apply predictive score to millions of documents in the review set, and the reviewers can actually filter by the predictive score, and that makes the review process a lot easier as well. So that was a quick walkthrough of how the advanced e-discovery solution works, the end-to-end workflow, right? Creating a case, putting content on hold, and then the actual review itself. And once you have um, remove the sensitive information tagged and everything, you have the ability to export it to third-party solutions, or export it and transfer it to some reviewers or lawyers if you absolutely have to export it. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I think, and I know I've mentioned it already, like I think twice because I love them so much, but that predictive coding is almost like a trainable classifier for e-discovery, right? We can teach that
That's
model.
what I was going to say.
I got to steal it. I said it once already.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So it reminded me the same, right? I mean, trainable classifiers are more in context of applying sensitivity labels and detecting sensitive information, but this works on similar principle, I would say. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, I like the point you made about the context as well, because especially during investigation, context is everything. I mean, one photograph on its own or one phrase by itself might mean something completely different, depending on the context.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, awesome. Thanks for that, Reshmi. I think that would be really valuable to people.
My pleasure.
I guess let's move on then. So I guess our next segment is going to be Toy Box. So this is a segment just a little bit more about ourselves. It doesn't need to be security and compliance related. It can be a podcast. It could be a show. It could be a toy. It could be anything that we kind of want to cover that we're interested in and what kind of exciting us at the moment. And with that, as normal, I'll hand over to Lou to kick off.
Mate, you know what's coming, right?
I'm assuming it's something musical, Lou.
No wonder.
So that opening theme, I know neither of you know where that song came from, but it's by a band called Van Halen, and the song is called Jump. It's a variation. I did play everything on that, by the way, just to be clear, right? There's no sampling there. That's me physically playing.
The man's a musical genius.
But that lead synth is this guy. It's the Oberheim OBXA. It's legendary. It's a Growl Machine. It's a monster. It's a monster synth. It's software now, which is awesome. It's one of those virtual synths I was talking about last time, because to buy one of these things for real is, thousands and thousands of dollars that I'm not allowed to spend. But that's my toy box.
That's
I buy
awesome.
the virtual machines.
Forgive the musically oriented, but what's a Growl Machine? What's it for?
It's for growling.
What is
all those sounds that you're hearing? Prince used an OBX, Van Halen, Tears for Fears, all bands that were around before you two were even born. Let's move on.
A little bit before my time.
This gets more depressing the more we go on. What about you, Bo? What have you been up to, mate? What's in your toy box?
Yeah, so like I was talking about before, I'm a pretty big advocate for fitness and stuff within our industry. I don't think people focus on it enough, and it can lead to bad health side effects and things like that. I've been listening to a newer podcast fairly often. It's only have about 12 episodes out, I think, called Hacking Your Health. So the hosts are Ben, who is a personal trainer, and Dave, who's worked in our industry for a long time. I think he's moved up all the way from the bottom up to a CEO. And they talk about their thoughts on different types of training, workouts, and the journey that some people have taken in our field. They'll get some guests in to talk about how they've experienced it, what they've done, and try to give you some ideas on how to help with your own health. The premise for the show is about hacking your body, your mind, and business as a whole, and doesn't have a lot of the, fluff that you'd see in some of these other podcasts. They're not trying to sell anything. It's not about anything in particular. It's just about giving you some hints and some recommendations as to what you can do to try to increase your health and things you might want to start taking on and start looking into a little bit more, pick up your interest. So I found it really valuable, and that's my pick for this week.
Cool. Can I just point out, by the way, of the three of us, only one of us is standing.
I need to get a standing desk.
With that,
you can send me one, Lou.
With that, Reshmi.
Okay. Thank you, last man standing. So I guess for me, I've been always passionate about dance. So I'm a trained Bharatanatyam dancer. When I was, I was.
Can you say that again?
It's
What kind of
called
dancing is it?
Bharatanatyam. So
I don't know. I'm not going to
yeah,
pretend.
okay. So it's Bharatanatyam. It's an Indian classical dance form. It's very ancient. So yeah. So I've recently restarted my training. And what's exciting about Bharatanatyam is that you usually have that music playing in the background, and the instruments typically are flute and percussion instruments. And then there's usually a song, or sometimes it's just a tune. And the dancer, who by means of gestures of hands and expressions on face and exemplary footwork tries to convey the meaning of this song. There's a bit of facial expression, gestures of
Mm.
hands, and end of the day, the footwork is so complex that after reaching a certain training level, like you get black belt in karate, we earn our right to wear a chilanka, which is a kind of anklet that has like hundreds of bells in it. And if you miss a beat in dance, it's gonna give you away, right? Because it has to exactly meet the rhythm of the dance, the beats and instruments. So yeah,
Yeah. Well,
I'm really excited about that.
That's awesome.
so when do we get to see some dancing?
I might have a performance in May, but not sure if I'll be ready for that.
Well, we might be back in the office by May.
It's definitely
So
not going to happen in the office, Lou.
that's what you think. We'll
Record and
talk
stream
later.
it live. It would be no pressure at all.
Yeah, let's see. There's still time, right?
That's right.
Fantastic. I'd love to join in. All right, and I think with that, that's a wrap.
Yeah, I think
Bo, what do you
we've
think?
hit all the targets. I think we've done what we wanted to do. So next time on Coast to Coast, we'll be covering some of the recent news and compliance. We'll talk about probably some information protection and records management stuff, because I don't think we've really talked about that very much yet. And it's a cool thing to cover. And we'll have a special guest on. So that we'll have them in, we'll have them say what they're excited about in compliance, what they're currently working on, what they're interested in. And I just want to have a special thanks to Reshmi. So she's our first guest on Coast to Coast.
Yep.
So Reshmi, if there's anything you want to close off with, how do we find you online?
Yeah, definitely. Compliance is my area of interest. I've been a GRC consultant before as well, and it's kind of good to see how it all comes together in terms of Microsoft technologies supporting some of the business use cases. You can definitely reach me on LinkedIn, and then feel free to strike a conversation from there. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. And you can find both Lou and myself on LinkedIn. I'm also at Twitter at Wirebytes. And I think with that, we'll close it out. Thanks, everyone. Peace.
Thanks, everyone.